Plan it.
48-hour art check, 1 year anniversary, round
Yes,
143.
that's right.
Been doing this for a year, man.
I know. One whole year.
It's weird to think about.
Yeah, it's actually weird because it just seems like longer,
Right.
it actually seems like it's been longer, but it's because we've done 142 episodes in 1 year, which is insane. So that's
Yeah.
like, once again, if you guys stick with the 48-hour art check, you end up with a lot of content. Like, even doing twice a week, we're gonna end up with a lot
Yeah.
by the
I
end of
mean,
next year.
twice a week is over 100 episodes a year.
Yeah, that's insane.
And that's like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just weird to think about. It's just super weird to think about. Like if you, um, I don't know. Like I just keep thinking of other podcasts that I listen to and other vlogs that I watch and everything. And yeah, a year and having like more than 12 episodes is pretty
Yeah.
decent. But we it's a lot. So yeah,
Yeah, so we've just surpassed, like, I don't think Game of Thrones has 142 episodes.
yeah. There you go.
Take that, Game of Thrones.
Right. Oh
So
man.
cool. Yeah, like, I can't. I am really. I think it's been a really positive thing doing
Yeah.
this, because I've definitely it's definitely helped me up my game and accountability, and worked in kind of the way we sort of envisioned it. And so I'm pretty excited about that. I think. Plus, it's gotten a little bit, like, the format and stuff has gotten more polished, and I feel like it's a lot better, and it's been cool because the community's built too.
Yeah.
So, speaking of, like, Squatchy, as usual, is in the chats. How's it going, Squatchy? And Matthew Enstrom is in the chats as well. Hey, Matthew, how you doing?
What's up, guys? Yeah, yeah, it's cool. So I assume we'll kind of talk about that in our topic,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. Um, so we should jump in here. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start this time. So I spent some time rearranging my studio. And if you were to see like a 360 view, it's kind of funny because it's like one of those like sitcom dinner tables where everybody just sits on one side of the dinner table so the cameras can go on the other side. Because like in the
Nice.
corner you're not looking at are like lights and mic stands and cameras and whatever, but it's like a way better setup. And then I worked more on the animation, so I now have I've got the video inside of the animation, and that's playing and synced up, and crashed my computer a few times because of the stuff. And then I've been teaching myself Affinity Designer. So there's I don't know. Have you heard of Affinity?
No, I haven't. Give me a rundown. What is it?
Quick rundown is it's being called the Illustrator Killer. And
Ooh.
I don't feel like it's there yet, but it is not far off. A full package on the iPad Pro is $20 one time, no subscription, and then a full package on the desktop is $50 one time, no subscription.
Wow.
And so, but I mean,
That
it's like
that's pretty good.
full on, yeah, it's full on vector and raster, and so it has like what they call personalities or profiles, and you can switch back and forth, and it's like jumping in between like a Clip Studio Paint and like a watered down version of Illustrator, but you never leave the software. And so on the same artboard, you can like have like pressure sensitive, like pixel based brushes, and then mix that in with like Boolean curve, like paths and anchor points, or what they call nodes. And it's pretty legit. So it's been kind of interesting.
Nice. Um, does it add, like, way too many points when you're doing, like, freehand stuff?
Uh, like Illustrator, it has the option to kind of smooth or not.
Mm.
And so you've got that. But I mean, I've tried several vector things on the iPad, and it's probably a year ago. I was unimpressed most of them. Like it's just kind of clunky, but this one I've only spent maybe an hour or so on it, but it's fairly intuitive. And I feel
Nice.
like the handlebars and anchor point control is pretty legit. Like you can get in there with your finger or the Apple Pencil and both feel pretty fluid. So, and I
Nice.
mean, like Adobe's mobile apps don't even do that. You don't even have anchor point control. You just have like blob brush and eraser tool. That's kind of all Adobe does from the vector standpoint.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense.
So,
That sounds really intriguing. I'm kind of curious as you get further if you see it kind of like I think the longer you play with it, like the more you'll be able to kind of let us know like whether it's equivalent or getting close and stuff like that.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
really cool.
I'm surprised with the number of features and surprised that the UX doesn't feel super crowded because I was just like, oh, I wonder if I could do this effect. And without having to like Google it or anything, I just a couple clicks and I found the exact thing I was looking for. That's happened multiple times, so it's super intuitive. But I'll probably do what I normally do with software. I'll learn it by creating a bunch of video tutorials.
Hmm.
So I'll play with it for a month or two and get to know it kind of inside and out, and then I'll probably build a playlist around it because I don't think Adobe's going away anytime soon. But I do think if you are on your own, um, $50 a month is a lot unless you're making a lot off of that software. And it's
Yeah.
it's powerful stuff, but if you could give yourself a $50 a month raise because you pay $70 one time to get it on your iPad and on your desktop, and it does most of what you need it to do. I mean, the stuff that it doesn't
Yeah.
do is few and far between. So, and kind of fringe. So, anyway, it's pretty good.
That's super exciting because like I think here's the thing that I like about that is I don't see Adobe being replaced anytime soon. However, I could see a competitor coming in the market and really screwing up their pricing,
Yeah.
which to me would be nice. Like so I'd like to see it's kind of like Cintiq, like I'm always waiting for that tablet that's just going to revolutionize the whole thing and make Cintiq drop their prices ridiculously. I'm all for that. So I think if they can get close to Adobe, if it doesn't surpass Adobe, it'll force Adobe to innovate, which I
Yeah.
think would be really cool, especially on pricing, because this whole subscription thing is just like a silent killer.
Yeah. We're being
Yeah.
asked in the chat, Adobe versus who, and I'm talking currently about Affinity Designer. Um, it's kind of a vector raster situation. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's the problem is I kind of have Stockholm syndrome with Adobe. I am just so dang fast in the Adobe
Yeah.
software that it's hard to leave. Even I even feel like to some extent the like Affinity is superior to Illustrator in its layout and UX, and like a lot of that makes way more sense because they, instead of like cobbling things onto something that's 20 years old, they just said, hey, this iPad thing, let's build something from the ground up that works for this thing.
Yeah.
um, and it just they've done a really good job. But at the
That's
same
exciting.
time, I mean, my left hand, I don't even look at the keyboard when I'm in Illustrator and Photoshop. I just like most people have been using it for a few years. My left hand just dances across the keyboard as I've got my stylus out on my Cintiq, and I don't even think about it. I'm not even thinking about which tools I'm using. It just comes very second nature. That's
Yeah.
super super hard to beat.
Yeah. Understandably. Yeah. No,
So
I think that would be the big learning curve for anybody who's kind of a wizard at Adobe is just like having to learn a new wizarding skill.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're software agnostic or you haven't jumped into, I feel like they should be sponsoring us. Affinity, if you're hearing this, feel free to sponsor us. We'd be happy because I'm about to plug you super hard. If you're beginning, or you're starting out, or you're willing to work through some slow times while you get up to speed, I mean, you save yourself $600 a year.
Yeah.
So that's not bad.
No, that's not bad at all. And compared to the equivalent, yeah, I mean, definitely like look into it and stuff. But yeah, that sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah. So
Wow,
how
I
how
envy
about
new designers. They
yeah?
have
So that was my 5 minute, 30-second rundown. Sorry. What
no
have
worries.
what have you done?
So I'll show a bit too after this, but so I only managed to ink one level of the water. I was hoping to have two, but
Mm-hmm.
I got one down, and partially because the website is just like most times I've had building websites just taking 20 times longer than I estimated. Um, but I'm a little further on my website, and then I also tracked the last song for our demo, like all the instruments. So at this point, we should be able to go in, polish up the guitars, and do vocals over it and stuff.
Cool.
But no need for like the full band, which is always kind of hard for everybody to do. Just kind of getting their schedules together to have recordings. So
Yeah.
um, but yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with the thing. I wonder if I can screen share on here.
You
So
should be able to.
let's see. Is there a screen share setting?
Upper right hand corner, three dots.
Yes, there we go. Okay. See if I can get this working. Um okay, there we go. So I'm going to show this and I think this will work. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yeah, so right now I'm going through and kind of tagging every comic, but I'll show like a little preview of uh, of where I am on the whole thing. So you're going to basically have your website, landing page, portfolio is going to have these different sections of illustration, design, custom lettering, editorial book illustration, haunted mansion portrait, storyboard concept. The only thing I haven't SEO'd yet is the storyboard concept. It's like that frog I forgot to eat first. I don't know if you guys heard that phrasing. It's used a lot in business.
Yeah.
But you're supposed to kind of eat your frog first. Like you're supposed to do the least enjoyable thing first as your first task, and it makes tasks more efficient. But like a true human being, I am putting off some of the hard stuff for last. Um, this is what's taking forever. This is the list of all the comics that will be readable on here. Some of them, like ones I've done for clients, there might only be like 1 or 2 pages. There's a couple I've done for clients I'm not including, but this is most of my comics. And then quarterly stories is going to take forever. That's going to be one of the last things I have to update. Um, although all the images are there, so it's just a matter of going in and labeling everything so you can navigate it and like see what page number you're on and stuff. And then videos are all set, blogs all set, interviews and links are coming. Actually, they're done. The store is like semi-complete. It's as complete as it's going to be before I launch. About section and the contact section are all done. So it's just a matter of like really finishing up the last section of portfolio, the last like 6 or 7 comics, and the last beast is that quarterly stories thing. So I might be able to actually knock it out. I'm hoping like between tonight and tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
and then get the domain transfer worked out as well.
Cool.
So yeah.
Squatchy is asking what template that is.
Do you remember? Because I'm using the same one you use. I don't know if you
Yeah, it's a
know.
Squarespace one, and I can never remember because I'm kind of like one of those set it in front of you guys. But I will look and post that somewhere. But
Yeah,
yeah, I like that one. I will say this. I showed Josh. I was like, "Hey, look at all these tricks I learned with this template," and then he just filled it with just decades of incredible illustrations and content, and it looks great. And I like that our sites are basically the same, but like I don't think anybody would ever look at it and think that because it's kind of like a blank canvas, and so because you're filling it with your work and I'm filling it with mine, it's like it doesn't feel like it's the same site.
yeah,
Um,
and it's gonna be, I mean, it's gonna be interesting. Also, the thing that's nice about these template sites for an illustrator is like like we were saying when I was debating whether to stick with WordPress or switch over, to me, like I just it came down to like I don't want um, I just I really don't want to have to like go through the whole headache of like doing coding and doing updates of
Yeah.
templates and stuff like that. I want something really simple that just does the job and does it, you know, as effectively and efficiently as possible. So Squarespace is good for that. The one thing I'd say as a warning that nobody told me, I'm forgetting what it's called. What is it called? Frames? It's like the thing where it you can cite tagged images and it'll cycle through them. It's not a gallery, but it's like
Oh,
a
the summary blocks.
yes. Okay, so the summary block, which is really great. It's one of the coolest things on Squarespace.
Mm-hmm.
It's what drew me to it. But unfortunately, it has a limit of 30 images.
Yeah.
And I've looked online and pretty much have not heard anyone who has like a hack or a way around that. So the only real cheat I saw was to like do multiple summary blocks, but that doesn't really work for web comics. So if you do web comics on Squarespace, so far from what I see, you're going to have to mix blogs with galleries. And that seems to be the workaround right now. If they ever remove that 30 limit on the summary blocks, like it's going to open this whole new world of, I think, web comics on Squarespace. But
Yeah,
I think
and
it's
I, and I
that's a real, like, that's one limitation I wish I had known.
well, and I feel like if they were to actually just do like you know, here's the ability to do webcomics the way that you've always wanted to.
Yeah.
Holy crap, they'd have a flood of people jumping ship from because I think that one plugin for WordPress, I think it's been abandoned. There was
Yeah.
one that kind of made it, and the guy maybe like 5 years ago was like, it'll still work, but I'm not going to update it anymore. And so from a webcomic standpoint, it's becoming very platform
Yeah.
because you either hand code it, you kind of hack it yourself, or you just put it on like Tapas or one of the other kind of platform specific webcomic things.
Mhm.
But if Squarespace
Although
or
topic
Wix,
being the most important, where you can check out quarterly stories and add it to your library if you haven't yet.
there you
Sorry.
go, right there. So yeah, man, we're talkative tonight. So what about Oh, it's me first. Challenges. Um, Learning new software is frustrating. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
I don't really have a ton of challenges. I mean, I wasn't planning on rearranging my studio, but I kind of needed to do a few things that I was trying to do. That took some time. Um, yeah, that's nothing hugely challenging that I can think of. So
Nice.
yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. How about you?
I feel you on the new learning new software kind of thing because it's kind of figuring out the whole webcomic thing and the structure of this, and then also just having to do the tedium of website building. That's been the biggest struggle. Just trying to kind of fit that on top of my regular overloaded schedule. And then just like art direction's just tough sometimes, and it's been tough. Like
Yeah,
so, which is part of the ebb and flow of like kind of I think being in a leadership position anywhere, but it's just it gets heavy sometimes. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Um, I Federal law prohibits me from saying too much about this, but I'll speak generally. I'll say general things that don't have anything to do with anything specific. Hypothetically, if you're teaching a college course and you catch someone plagiarizing someone's work, um, it becomes like the policies and the procedures that you have to follow, hypothetically in that situation, are really time consuming and frustrating. And the whole time, you would hypothetically be thinking, why bother for a letter on a piece of paper that no one cares about? because you didn't actually learn anything,
Yeah.
hypothetically. That's
I've hypothetically been through the same scenario at a college, and it luckily was one of those scenarios where I think we recorded the student like with their permission because of California law. We were saying like we're going to record this,
right.
just so you're aware. Um, and luckily the student just kind of owned it, so that made it a lot easier than kind of like a big fight because if they hadn't owned it, then it would have gone to, yeah, it would have gone to a bunch of different levels and stuff.
Yeah.
It's never good news to do. So you're a young student in college, just take the F. It's better.
Right. It's way better. It's way better every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I forgot about that challenge, but that's like during the day challenge. But I still think like I think about it at night because it's just gonna
Yeah.
monopolize like the next couple of weeks of my life as
Yep.
I do all that. So um, plans for me, I am planning on. Oh, let me turn this off. We've got a couple of comments that I haven't been noticing. Neru Iru says Tapas has so many ads though it glitches my phone. And soon you'll be able to go to just coralitostories.com and it'll have this slick
Yeah.
Squarespace site which will work.
Yeah. You can go right now and see a really old school WordPress webcam site.
And then Victor's here. What's up, man? And he's wondering what made you decide to do Tapas over Webtoons.
So it was just the platform just seemed kind of better, but in retrospect, I just picked one and went with it. I didn't do a ton of thinking.
Yeah.
I've heard great things about both. I think the downside that I'm seeing on Tapas is like, I think the majority of their market is like anime,
Mm,
but I'm suspecting that Webtoons is somewhat similar because I think in pop culture that's just an online comic world that kind of is a dominant force. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Sorry. So plans. Let's see. It is Wednesday. So before we meet again, I will completely finish the Kickstarter video. If I can get a little bit of help with some people helping me build the assets, and if not, I will animate the. This won't make any sense, but I will animate the hands. I will animate the signs that are falling from the ceiling, um, and all the papers. So
mm,
I've got the camera movements done. I've got all the effects done, so it looks like everything. I've got it lit. I've been using this new. It's not new to After Effects, but it's new to me. This new style of lighting that I really love, and I need to do a tutorial on it once I actually figure out what I've done. But right now, it's like it looks like I want it to look, and so I'm going to finish this project.
yeah,
But yeah, that's so I'll get all of the animating done that I can get done. The only holdup would be if I have to spend an evening or two making my own assets. If I can't get other people in the anthology to help out, and if I can, then it'll save me 2 nights. And if I can't, then it'll still look awesome, and then I can say I made almost everything in there. So, yeah. So those are my plans. What are your plans?
So my plans are mainly to wrap up this site. So I'm hoping by the next time we do the check, either that day or the night after we do our check, that I'll be wrapped and this thing will be live. Um, and it's looking like that's more and more possible. So we'll see. And then I would like to like ink another level. I'm gonna just say one because I'm realizing how time consuming this other thing is.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, yeah, and then I'm pretty excited too because my band's playing a couple shows in July, like two in a row, which should be pretty fun. So and then I got like a birthday in a week too. So yeah,
Cool.
pretty good stuff. But mostly for the plans, just I guess you know what I forgot. Our next check will be on Monday, so I should be more ambitious with what I'm going to get done.
Yeah.
So I will at least have two more levels inked on that page, and I will definitely by the next art check be done with the website because I was still defaulting to thinking Friday. So yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I just realized I need to plug something in. So I need you to stall for a minute.
No problem.
Okay,
Oh, I
here we
thought
go.
you were talking about like a plug-in. Like I've been
Right,
web
no.
page so long. I thought you meant a plug-in, like a
No,
WordPress.
an actual physical plug.
Got it.
I know you've been dealing in pixels and code for the last week, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny how that really like I actually texted Scott when we finished recording because it was after 9 and I thought it was Thursday. And I was like, "Crap, I'm so sorry I'm running late to Artcasters." And he was like, "What are you talking about, man?"
Yeah.
It's just
Time flies when you're stuck in the existential hell that is coding. I'll,
yeah.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, for those of you in the chats and stuff, yeah, it's a lot of work doing these special projects. Anybody who's done like the hundreds day challenge will know this, but it's like it just starts to kind of burn your brain a little bit to the extent where you'll just kind of lose track of time. Like days will seem like different days and stuff like that. But it's always worthwhile afterwards because whenever I look back on projects like that, I tend to have like a moment of just kind of like, how did I manage to get all that stuff done? Um, and then Victor in the chats agreed that manga is trending more in web comics, and that makes a lot of sense um, because that's the market. So yeah. Um, Iru said burn brain is an apt description. It really is. So it's like you take on these massive projects and you just yeah, it's like your brain's in a slow cooker for a little bit. But like I said, the nice byproduct is like for instance, when I'm done with this website, I'm gonna be like unable to remember how difficult it is. It's kind of like the birth thing where it's like for some reason people will have like a second kid or something like that. And it's like if you've ever seen a birth live, you can realize like how insane that is for somebody to do that again. It's
Yeah.
like it's violent and brutal, but there's something about the human condition where we make stuff and then we forget how hard it was to get there because we see the result and it's so cool.
That's
So
funny. I don't know what you guys are talking about, but that sounds like a really good transition into our topic.
yeah, I think it will be.
So,
So we were just generally I was just kind of rapping about how like when you're working on a big project it kind of puts your brain in like a weird mode where you forget days and are a little scrambled, but then you look back after you're done and you're like, how did I get all that done? Like
yeah,
forgetting the nights of no sleep and all that fun stuff.
yeah. So do we want to do? Okay, I remember now. All right. Do you want to do the intro, or do you want me to?
Please do it because I actually forgot. So
Okay, great. All right. Today's topic is swinging for the fences and a year in review. And so this today, and the only reason I know this is not because Josh and I are terribly organized, because we're really not when it comes to this. Uh, but the only reason I know this is because I got on Facebook this morning or this afternoon, and it does that memory thing, and it's like a year ago you shared this status, and a year ago today I said something along the lines of, "My buddy and I are starting this accountability thing," and that was the first episode of the 48-hour art check, and it was terrible compared to what we're doing now, as are most things. But so I thought it would be interesting, and then we were talking about the projects that we're working on, kind of off the air, and I'm in a situation right now where I could be done with this project tonight and it would be what a lot of people would be considered like fit for purpose. A lot of people would be super happy with it. Um, but I'm going to push for another 3 or 4 days because I can get it to a place where it'll become like a significant portfolio piece for me. And I know that I can, and there's kind of this balance where I could spend a month on this and it would be, like mind-blowingly incredible compared to a lot of the stuff I've made, but it would take a month. Or I could spend another 4 days on it, and it's gonna be pretty dang cool. I'm already really excited about it, and
yeah,
uh, and so I thought it might just be kind of cool to talk about kind of those two things. Like it's interesting to think about kind of take an aerial view and think about everything that we've done in a year, and then also why in personal projects when we don't have to, we push harder on them and kind of go for broke, just because we can. I thought those would be kind of two intertwined and interesting topics.
Cool. Yeah. I like it. I think it's a good topic. I would say like let's pitch off with like the kind of giving something your all instead of just kind of getting it done, and and the navigation you were talking about, which is like this fine balance where if you're too much of a perfectionist, it actually becomes like a sabotage to yourself. In a workplace, it can be a sabotage to your coworkers, right? Something I like to think of is like if you're on a construction site and one guy's job is just to lay like a really clean, perfectly leveled slab of concrete, and that's like one of his duties for the day, and you're supposed to like build an entire skyscraper, but like that's one of the many tasks the person has to do. At the end of the day, the skyscraper's up and the guy's still smoothing that one slab of concrete.
Right.
I think most workers working with that guy would look at him and be like, what a jerk. Like, because like, well, you'll have a great, beautiful slab of concrete that's you've completely been useless to the project and failed to kind of fulfill the whole. So that's something to kind of keep in mind is like, if you're polishing the same panel in comics for like weeks on end, um, how many pages are you planning on doing before you die? Because
Yeah.
so you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're working on these things. However, when I was like when I was a younger illustrator, I had this tendency to I would give things my all, but there were client projects initially early on that I would just kind of knock out because I'd be like, oh, this will just be really quick, and kind of like no one will see it. It fulfills what the client's asking for. The client has bad taste anyway, so I just knock it out, and then I found myself like a year later with like the only portfolio pieces I had were personal projects,
Yeah.
and I was like, that's not good. I've just wasted all that time. Like I could have been using those clients as a springboard to make cool stuff, like whether that's even in their pay grade, like and I do think there's something to be said for that. And then as I've gotten older, I've realized like that's a pretty common thread among some of the most successful designers. And Draplin's like somebody I got to see speak this last year, and he's all about that. Like, if your friend has like a garage sale and you're doing like the flyer for it, make it the sexiest garage sale flyer you can, because nobody looking at your website is going to know it's your friend's garage sale. They're just going to judge it by the quality of the work. So if that's the coolest flyer on the planet, if you make it look like art that's repped by Saatchi or something, or well, not repped, but done for like Saatchi and Saatchi or like some high-end design firm, then guess what kind of clients are going to come to you? High-end design clients, right? But
Yeah.
if your work looks like throwaway, like, you know, um, just clip art, like you're going to get throwaway clip art clients. So it's like it's kind of like it is a weird karmic thing where I think in art you get what you kind of put in,
Yeah.
and so like one thing I commented to Cory, like I think before we started recording, when he was talking about the extra work he's putting in, I think it's really cool that he takes that kind of ownership over his projects, because at the end of the day, like even if like, which by the way, the Kickstarter I guarantee is going to fund. I think everybody involved in it's so proud of it. There's just we aren't going to let it not fund. And then we got this great community, like everybody who shows up to artcheck. Like we got Artcasters community, we got like the whole hundreds community. We just like it's going to get funded, but even in worst case scenario, let's say it just bombed, you'd still be able to walk out of that with something strong for your portfolio. Whereas if you do like mediocre on it, then it might fulfill the purpose in the short term, but long term you've got nothing from it. And
Yeah.
and that's unfortunately like something I had to learn kind of the hard way. But you learn pretty quick when you're like your rent depends on it, at the time.
Right.
Like if I didn't learn that lesson quickly, I wouldn't have had sustainable clients that kept me up for like 10 or 15 years. So
Yeah, and I think there's an economic principle here. I heard a talk a long time ago called the law of increasing returns, and that's where I'm gonna steal several things. So if you want to look that up, it's interesting. It's a BYU, the president of BYU in the 70s, I think, or something, maybe 80s. Anyway, it was. He talks about this idea of the law of diminishing returns, and the law of diminishing returns is kind of that toxic perfectionism, right? There's this concept where usually on the first pass on something, you get 90% of it done. On the second pass, you get like 97% of it done. But on the third pass, you might get like 97.3, and on the fourth, you get 97.4, and then eventually, like the amount of return on your time investment or effort investment or financial investment diminishes over time. And so there's this kind of like curve that starts to approach zero. And it never really actually touches zero, but it's like mowing your lawn, right? If you mow your lawn, you can mow it one way, and maybe you're like super meticulous and you cross cut it a second time. You're not going to do it a third time. And if you did it a
yeah,
fourth time, you'd be wasting your time. But on the other end of the spectrum, there are other types of activities that give you the law of increasing returns, where the more effort you put into it, the more return you get out of it. And usually the deciding factor between those is going to be a short term and long term benefit. And so on the law of decreasing returns, it's usually short term type stuff. And the law of
yeah,
increasing returns is usually long term stuff that's typically delayed. And so the reason I was thinking about this is, as you were talking, I was thinking that um, the short term benefit of this Kickstarter video to me is going to be fairly minimal. I learned some stuff. Some people are going to be excited about it. But the potential long term benefit of having like a super kick A piece in my portfolio that showcases a completely different style of animation that I've never done before, and does that in an impressive way, that that potentially has increasing returns that could be persistent for decades. But I don't know that I would get any more returns by spending an extra week on it. Like
exactly.
at a certain point, the gains become incremental at best. And in art and illustration, often you can overwork something. So there's you can ink something, and then you can keep inking it, and then you can keep noodling with it, and eventually you just ruin the piece.
Yeah,
There's kind of that sweet spot. And so when you were talking about kind of like the balance between putting in the extra effort to really make it, something really awesome, but also, trying to avoid that toxic perfectionism where you just noodle on something and indefinitely and you never finish anything. That just kind of reminded me of those two principles. And if you can find the sweet spot in those principles where you get the most benefit out of the shortest amount of time, but push past that to just before you start triggering that diminishing returns, that's a
yeah,
really nice area to be in, a really nice range.
yeah. And I think a good example is like I think everybody who's taught an art class has seen like a kid who starts off with like this beautiful, beautiful drawing, and then they just kill it. They murder it by
Right.
overdoing.
Yep.
And it's like it really is like watching like the death of something beautiful because it starts out so loose and beautiful and
Yeah.
great, and then it just gets tighter and uglier like the more it's worked. And so like to me I mean I think we mentioned this yesterday, but it's like part of the thinking of like plein air painting um is the idea that like they were sick of what the realists were doing to nature, and the idea was that like there's a feeling and there's a moment and there's like kind of a gesture to like the whole thing. And so if you actually capture it and you still it too much, it's not really reflective, it's not really realism. So that's kind of the theory behind plein air painting. And what's interesting to me is like I prefer plein air painting to like fully rendered paintings half the time.
Yeah.
There are times though where like that beautifully rendered thing that somebody spent half a year on does pay off, and in those cases it's really hard to match, right? Because you know, there's some kind of perfectionist style cartoonists out there that pull it off, but they even would probably be like, yeah, this isn't perfect. The finger's off, like this thing's off, like I fudged the line here. Um, because like at some point you have to kind of call it because you got the next page to do.
Right.
If you're a storyteller, you know, you're probably going to want to like do a story that's longer than one page, you know?
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, I like that. And I was thinking along those lines, it'd be interesting to talk about what we've accomplished because I think, well, I'll tell you where this came from. One is it's just a natural thing to do on a year anniversary, but two is I'm looking at the amount of work that you've put on your website. I mean, you look at that list of comics. Um, it's an incredible amount of work. I mean, it represents tens, if not hundreds of thousands of hours. Hundreds of thousands is an exaggeration. Tens of thousands of hours over the course of, however long you've been doing this. And for me, I look at that and I'm like, I've done so little, right? But then actually in my head, I was looking back, it's like, well, in the last 12 months, what actually have I done?
yeah.
Recently I finished, a pretty good 4-page anthology. I like the art in it and the storytelling is pretty good. I prior to that did a mini sticker stint. Prior to that I finished kind of this animation that I was working on. Prior to that I kind of wrapped the story that I was drawing and writing for the children's book, The Tongue Cut Sparrow.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of that, we took on this kind of secret project that didn't really pan out, where we just like marathon this thing and did this pretty cool animation that was in like Z Space, and you illustrated it and I animated it, and so you look at that and like in 12 months, that's a lot. And that's just what
Yeah.
I did. And you've done however many like fully rendered pages plus client work plus the illustration of that animation. Plus we've been doing the show, and just doing the show represents at least 3+ hours a week, not including like designing, illustrating, and animating all of the assets, and all that. I mean, I can just this didn't exist 12 months ago. I can just push a button, and like
Yeah.
all these like creatures start telling people what to do on the screen. Like all of that has happened in the last 12 months. And so I was thinking, like 10 years from now, I could have a body of work that matches yours now. Obviously, you'll have another 10 years and I'm never going to catch up. But it's just interesting that 12 months is not that long of a time. I was telling my students who are in their 20s, I said, when you're 3, a week feels like an eternity, right? And when
Yeah.
you're 8, a month just seems to last forever. But a week comes and goes, But I said, when you're my age, I'm approaching 40, I'm 39. I feel like semesters are like happen in the blink of an eye, and that's like 3 months. And like I look back at when we started this thing, and it feels concurrently both like that was like forever ago, like ages ago, like I was a completely different person when we started this. That was, decades ago, but also it also feels like we just barely started it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really weird. It's fascinating too because like even just the process of building the site, like I don't frankly take a lot of time like looking back at like what I've accomplished
Right.
because I'm always kind of moving forward to the next project. But one nice byproduct of like having to kind of curate your own portfolio and stuff is to be like, holy crap. Because like the work I'm going to show on my site, like that you guys will be able to see fairly shortly and in a much easier fashion than you can see now. It's like, it's not the whole body of work, it's a very small section. But what's weird is just because of the amount of time I've been at it, that small section is pretty big. And that's really like kind of daunting to think about, but it kind of makes sense because like and none of this is like in-house work. Like most of this is just work I did, from home. But it makes sense because that was my primary job for like 15 years.
Yeah.
To put it into context of like what I do daily, I do at least 5 finished graphic designs a day. And that's just when I'm on the clock. And so like, when I think about that and then I think about my output before being in house, I'm like, maybe it wasn't that great, So it's like it's a it's a weird thing. And also if I compare it to like a Marvel artist or somebody who's on like a monthly or a bi-monthly book, even a mini series, it's a very small drop in an ocean of work that's out there. But one thing I would say is like I think that this year, if anything, has really exemplified what we've talked about on and off like all year when we're doing these things, which is like this incremental approach to things, like the 100 days of making comics kind of approach, like the idea of like you just kind of carve away at things a little bit at a time, and before you know it, you have this massive quantity of work.
Yeah.
And I think this podcast and show like on YouTube is like a good example because it's like we just kind of chipped away at it. Even the assets that you added, like the animations of like the bugs and stuff that like fly through, all of that stuff was like incrementally added.
Right.
As backtrack through it, you can actually see that process, like where it goes from just us like live streaming and being like, how's this even going to work,
Yeah.
And then figuring out a format and figuring out a timer because we're both really long-winded. This being a perfect example of that. But it's
Do
like,
you remember our first timer?
yeah, I do.
It was that our heads spinning in a circle, and when it
Yeah.
got back to the beginning of the circle, it was the worst because you couldn't really tell when your time was up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we had, yeah, and you say that like we've been using this format, and Josh and I constantly joke with each other that we're like kind of malcontents. Not that we have bad attitudes, but like I don't think we have the personality where we're ever really satisfied with anything. And so I constantly like side eye, our format here, which I think works really well. And I'm constantly like, I could do that better. But like you look and it's like what we started with was nothing, and then we kind of had this intro animation, and then we kind of had like these weird little timers. At one point in time, we had this like pen that would spin in a circle, and it was way too big. And like I didn't build all of this, and you didn't build all of this, and like let's do this right here. It's like little tweaks here and there. I sent you some sketches, and then we did a storyboard, and then you designed the characters, and then I animated them, and that was all like kind of just this back and forth, literally over the course of probably 6 months. I don't know when's the last time I made a major change on it,
Yeah.
but not recently. But also, you're right. It wasn't like because we could have. I'll tell you what I would have done 10 years ago. I still wouldn't have gone live. I would have this ever growing pile of constantly improving and never finished assets, and I never would have pulled the trigger.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, and that's a good thing to think about is like, while like we didn't launch like perfectly, we did it. And all of this resulted from like a 5-minute conversation we had at like 4 in the morning.
Right.
We had Cory on Artcasters, and Cory and I were just talking about how cool it would be to have like somebody to kind of hold you accountable to getting these things done because we were both in the thick of pretty big projects. And it's like it's just neat to see how like this whole thing built out of just us being like, yeah, let's try it, you know. And that is a hard thing to do if you're toying with perfectionism to a certain extent because you know, like once again, you could just refine the format over and over again. And by the time we'd be ready to launch, like the platform would be dead,
Yeah.
and it'd be like, sorry, there's this new streaming service. That's the new thing. And it's like, oh, we got to reformat everything. End up in this eternal loop by not kind of just going with it and like trying to kind of perfect it as you go, like making it work first and then making it better,
Yeah.
which I think is a really good thing. It's weird. I like that finished, not perfect philosophy. I also like the idea of finished, then perfect as a
Yeah.
philosophy too, where it's like you can kind of touch, like it's kind of like with drawing. If you start with the details, and this is a young student's mistake too. You'll notice this. I used to do it all the time when I would do life drawing. I get so frustrated that I couldn't capture the model. The poses were never long enough, and this is a complaint you'll always hear from young students. Like, it's like, oh, just hold still for like 5 more minutes. It's like it's a 20-minute pose. Like,
Yeah.
the longer like drawing, the more you're like 5 minutes in, like, come on, are we gonna change the pose? Because like it's been 5 minutes, man. Like because you realize, like, the thing is, when you're a young student, you see all the finish at the end and you want the finish first. So it's like I would go in and start drawing an eye, and then like I'd perfectly render the eye of the person, and then it's like an hour's passed and I have this beautiful rendering of an eye that's like, if I managed to get to the other eye, I didn't put my structure down right, so like the eyes are off because I didn't draw a through line,
Yeah.
and I've drawn like this weird demented human being, but there are components that are really nicely rendered. So that's the whole thing of like, if you try to start perfect with drawing, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. You got to start loose. You got to start like with the structure and the shapes and measurement, and like really get that groundwork laid. And then you can come in and like polish it up and make it all pretty.
Yeah.
Um, because the pretty stuff, like the longer you're at this, the more that stuff is like, oh yeah, that's easy. The structure stuff is like hard as hell. That's the challenge. That's the math. That's like the brain power. Which is why we all like inking, right? Because
Yeah.
inking is the fun part. Like, getting that structure there to ink is the hard part.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that is from kind of a long view and retrospect. It's fascinating to see that kind of pan out, because you're talking about a drawing, but you're also talking about you're talking in kind of dual parallelism, where you're talking about this microcosm of this drawing, but you're also talking about the last year. And it holds true for both of those things, in that we started with a structure before we did anything, before we designed anything or put anything to paper. I remember
Yeah.
having this conversation, and we were like, all right, yeah, I mean, maybe, and this is just literally off the top of our head. And I remember you saying, yeah, maybe, I don't know, we just talk about like, I don't know, what we did, and then why it was hard, and then like what we plan to do. And then the next morning you had completely forgotten what you'd said because we were up so late, and I had written it down, luckily. And so I was like, yeah. So we talked about, accomplishments and plans, or accomplishments, challenges, and plans. And you're like, yeah, that's genius. So we had this kind of structure. You came up with it and then forgot about it. We had this kind of structure, and then everything is built from that structure, and it's kind of expanded and grown, and we've cut back on certain things. At one point in time, about 40 episodes in, I was like, I can't do over an hour 3 times a week, and you're doing that 4 times a week because you're also doing Artcasters. And so we started putting timers in and stuff. And so, but it all grew from something. There was an initial idea, there was a plan, there was structure to that, and then we started adding, kind of meat to those bones, and now we've kind of skinned it and everything. But it's become that because of the structure. It's actually taken about a year, to get to this point.
Yeah.
And you look at it, and it's like, it's weird to think about this, because we've done 100, or we're in the middle of doing the 143, right? We've done 142 complete episodes. And I would say, from like a podcasting standpoint, like, I don't know, 40 to 60 of those are probably not worth putting in a podcast. But
Yeah.
in addition to that, though, there's, 60 to 80 of them that are really good, solid episodes.
Yeah.
And that's interesting too, because that's not easy, and that doesn't come from just like randomness. That comes from the structure, but also what we've talked about, we can only talk about it because we've been filling our lives with these things that we talk about. So these topics, it's not like we research them. It's not like we go in and like, we have like and you can tell as I ramble on forever. We don't have like talking points or a bulleted list or a script or anything. But what we're doing is we both read a lot of books and we watch a lot of things and we do a lot. And in observing and doing and consuming, both of us are able to talk at length about any topic kind of that surrounds like what we do. Like if you asked me to talk about, if you asked me to talk about, I don't know, something that isn't creativity or art or whatever, I'd be out of my depth. But because that's like how we choose to live our lives, it's an interesting side result of that we're able to literally produce content with no planning, and that there's a group of people that enjoy it. So I mean, I don't think it's for everybody. It's super long form,
Yeah.
but people who are kind of the same vein that want to listen to something while they're at the table or they've got a commute or whatever. It's interesting, and I think anybody could do it. And I think it's going to be super awkward at first because I'm literally just staring at a piece of glass right now, and talking as if I'm talking to another person. And
Uh-huh.
that kind of takes some getting used to. But if you live your life in a specific way, and you just kind of just every day carve away at that thing, you become a content expert by default.
Yeah. No, it's totally true. And I think like most of what we've learned in our careers, even this video you're building right now, it's like a lot of that is just play,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of it's like having an end goal and not really knowing exactly how you're going to get there. You might have like maybe a midpoint worked out. You might have back planned the whole thing, but even if you back plan the whole thing, in fact, if you're too into back planning, you might be really disappointed because like once again, like the website, the second I dipped into it, like 20 things that I didn't expect became problems. Um, but I have the end goal and a pretty clear end goal. So I'm playing and I'm getting it to do what I need it to do, because I have an objective. And it's amazing what can happen when you have like a simple structure, an objective, and then you just go for it because you kind of do figure it out on the way. And like I said, you end up picking up weird skills and stuff. Something I always tell my employees too is like that's a life thing too. Like I had a job at an AM PM working graveyard shifts where I learned more about customer service and sales than I've learned anywhere else in my life, and that's a weird thing. And also navigating difficult personalities, weird skills that at the time, had you asked me, I would have been like, no, I'm not picking up anything, I hate this job. But weirdly enough, like there are times in my life now when I'm art directing and stuff where I'll have to recall something from back then, and like go, oh, okay, that's how I should approach this, like the way I
Yeah.
approached this. It's a fascinating thing that like as you just kind of as you act, you start learning. But I think it usually requires action, and so that's like a real huge thing too. Like we could have toyed with this idea for a year, and never gone anywhere with it. But the fact that we actually just pulled the trigger, like once again, now we're 143. What is it?
This is 143.
Yeah, I mean that's nuts. So we're like almost to the midway to 200, or the third way, or sorry, 70, almost three-quarters of the way to
This
200.
this show is
But
not about math, so
yeah, no, if it were, that would tie in exactly with what Corey was saying about not speaking our expertise. You
right.
don't want to do a math podcast or show. Um, yeah, I'm excited. I'm really proud of what we've made, and I do feel like this show has had the return um of like keeping me motivated to have something to produce, because what's interesting is I have it built in my skin now to be like I have to have something to show Corey.
Yep.
Like it's it's kind of a weird thing, but it really helps. It really helps having that goal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult in that you have to commit to doing it.
Yeah.
But it also actually has made things a lot easier because prior to doing this, okay, so you talked about AM PM. I've had several jobs that have made me really focus on things that I'm doing because I never want to do them again. That's kind of the motivation. I dug holes for a living for a while. I worked on a farm near Death Valley where it was like, 100 plus degree weather, and it wasn't foodstuffs that they were growing, and so they could water it with treated sewage. And I would just walk up and down and like pull weeds. It sounds like Dust Bowl era stuff that I was doing because that's what it felt like. And I look at that and I'm like, one, I'll never go hungry. I might become poor, but I'll never go hungry because I can always do something like that. But two, I never really want to do that again. And that
Yeah.
like super motivates me to do this thing. And so because I have this weird like fear of constantly having to go back to the fields, um, I was working in these manic sprints where I would push super hard for like 4 days or like 10 days, and then I would crash and just coast for like 4 to 10 days, and then I would push super. And so I had these like, and I remember people telling me like, "Wow, you have a huge amount of production. You're outputting a lot," and they would be saying that while I'm sitting there, and I'm like on my third day in a row of like barely moving playing video games because I'm so exhausted because I didn't sleep for a week or whatever. And then and then we started this show, and I couldn't do that anymore. Um, and now I spend an hour minimum a day, sometimes 5 hours, but most of the time, 2 or 3 hours a day consistently, rather than like 12 hours after work and then get 3 hours of sleep and then repeat until my body physically isn't capable of doing that anymore. And so for me, it's been really interesting because it has leveled out. I'm probably producing slightly more this way, but it's probably about the same. But I'm not going to die 20 years earlier, which is kind of on the track that I think I was heading. I think I was going to go either insane or my body would just be like, okay, after this push, you're just dead now.
Yeah, no, and it's that's something I've had to learn the hard way too. I mean, I've always been somebody who works like a lot and doesn't stop. Um, and it's mainly because I think we're both very similar in the sense that we're very goal oriented people. So like you give us like an end goal and we'll work till we're dead to get there. and and it is helpful to have like a balance, like a kind of like try to get more of a stable, steady flow. It's also a little easier to predict, and what it's done for me is made me a better back planner,
Yeah.
where I'm better able to like take a gigantic project and break it into tiny chunks, because that's kind of the only way I think you can sustainably do that and have some semblance of a life, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but so that's definitely a benefit that I've experienced too. So, although
Yeah.
the last week and a half on this website, and I'm sure with the video editing, I'm starting to feel like, man, I've been running on like 2 3 hours of sleep a night. It's not necessarily a sustainable thing, but
Yeah.
yeah.
True. So, well, um, and we have people in the chats. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Neru Eru is saying, "That's funny, guys. I have to sleep. My goals will have to wait. It's bad timing. I wish I could plan like you." But yeah, and Victor's signing off as well. So this is probably a good time to go. But yeah, I think I think it's interesting. And here's the thing. And I think this is a good place to end. Um, there's this kind of quadrant that Stephen R. Covey talks about, where if you were to take urgent along the top and important along the side, there's four quadrants that come from that, and it becomes kind of confusing to describe. You have to read the book, but the idea is, urgent things always feel like super urgent, but are often not important. You know, if you ignore urgent things long enough, then they become important. Important things can feel urgent, but rarely do, and most of the time don't feel urgent, but are important whether you do them or not. And I tell this to my students all the time, and it kind of reminds me of this situation because the exact situation that I tell them is an important thing will matter a year from now. Whether you do it or not, it'll matter a year from now. And
Yeah.
I think it has mattered in my life, in your life, and in the lives of other people a year ago that we started to do this and stuck with it.
Yeah.
And I think the opposite would be equally true to our detriment had we decided, to do it and then noodled with it and never pulled the trigger on it or whatever, or decided we'll start it. I mean, when we started this, we didn't have a ton of free time. We were actually talking about doing this because we were both burning out on two very long form projects.
Yeah.
And this was something that we were going to add to help us maintain, which kind of seems counterintuitive. But had we decided, you know what, like, because I could have said, hey, in 3 months I'm going to be done with this book, and I'll be able to do it then. Probably we'd be looking at today, a year from now, or a year, today from a year ago, and it would be equally as detrimental as it is beneficial. So this is just to say, if you are listening to this and you think that you're not capable of doing what we can do, or you want to be where somebody else is and you don't know how to close that gap, the only thing you have to do is chip away at those important things and carve away a little bit of time for important things every day. And a year later, you'll have spent the entire year doing important things. Whereas if you push off important things to deal with only the urgent fire things, you will have spent a year doing nothing important.
Yeah, and tying back to the intro of this, you end up in that position of the illustrator is just fulfilling the job at the bare minimum, and then a year from now you'll have nothing in your portfolio, right? We want lasting stuff here, guys. So that's the goal. Anyhow, so thanks for being with us, like for a year, to those in the chats, and thanks Cory for doing this for a year. It's been crazy. I can't believe we're that insane.
Yeah, it's been awesome, man. It's been great. And if you want to check out the stuff that we've made, some of it is available online. And you can see my stuff at corykerr.com. I've got some of my digital illustration on the left, some of my traditional inking on the right. Soon I will have enough animation to put a third column or something up there. And you can always check out the podcast at corykerr.com/48hr. And if you want to see, limited time only, a super old, hasn't been updated in a while except for adding new pages, WordPress plugin site, go check out Quarterly Stories. And stay tuned, because very, very soon you'll see the brand new, fresh and shiny quarterlystories.com that Josh has been working on for a week or so and not sleeping much with. So thank you. A lot of people in the chats. I wasn't able to get to the chats. I'm recognizing one of the downfalls of my new setup, as I can't see the screen as well. But a lot of people in the chats have been congratulating us on a year, and for so many episodes, and it's awesome. And you guys make it worth it. And the conversations that we have with you guys and the community that is built around this has been really, really fun and really cool to get to know everybody. So thanks for showing up so frequently and so often, even though we're so long-winded. And everybody should go get some sleep. And we will see you guys on Monday.
Bye.